Hello, welcome to Connotation Points Video Snark. This video series isn't an audiobook, it's designed as commentary. This series emphasizes reading and listening comprehension skills. If you thought that this was an audiobook, maybe stick around and learn something. I also want to know why you thought that this was an audiobook, because no matter how many times that I say up front that this is a detailed book review, people still get upset that this isn't an audiobook. What made you click on this? My focus is on reading books, discussing what went wrong, and suggesting ways that they could be fixed. I'm continuing my read-through of Garden Spells by Sarah Addison Allen. If you haven't seen the earlier videos, you can find the links below. Chapter 9. As if this book didn't have enough going on, we now have a flashback to over 100-ish years earlier. The narration explains that the Waverley family was once quite wealthy, but lost their money in bad investments and to gambling. When news of this hit, the Clark family literally danced because they'd always hated the Waverleys. Then they went over to basically see how far that the Waverley family had fallen. When they were over there, Reese Clark, Emma's great-great-great-aunt, stole some apples from the garden out of jealousy. She claimed that it wasn't like the Waverleys were eating them anyway, and she was jealous of the singular thing the Waverleys had that the Clarks never did, the ability to grow plants. Reese gave the apples to the coast and had the apples turn into apple butter. This led to everybody having, and I quote, erotic dreams. But when the apple butter made from the Waverley apples ran out, they tried to make more, only it wasn't the same. Trying to break into the Waverley's yard late one night, Reese got stuck on the fence post. When she was discovered the next morning, she was then sent to live with her aunt. It was there that she had a great love affair with the stable boy, exactly like in her vision, and it was the best time of her life. But then she was caught and married off to some random old man in order to hide the family shame. And ever since then, the Clark family has always blamed their failures on the Waverleys. The day after the 4th of July, Emma Clark Manson tried to use the time-honored Clark way of getting what she wanted. She and Hunter John made love the morning, pillows knocked off the bed, sheets pulled from their corners. Had the radio not been in, the kids would surely have heard. He was exhausted and slept happy afterwards, so naturally Emma tried to talk to him about Sydney. She wanted him to think about how sexy Emma was compared to how old Sydney looked in her plaid shorts yesterday, which she had described to him in detail, but Hunter John refused to talk about Sydney at all, saying she had nothing to do with their lives anymore. Literally, the only thing that Emma is bringing to this relationship is physical relations. I have yet to see her offering anything else. Of course, a man is bored with you. He probably hasn't had a decent conversation in a decade. You did what I said, and you kept Hunter John away from the 4th of July celebration. That was good, Ariel told her. Your mistake was in bringing Sydney up with Hunter John this morning. No kidding. It's like Emma wants for Hunter to leave her for Sydney. Ugh. Anyway, Ariel goes on to basically call Emma a useless idiot. Emma asks like keeping her husband on a tight leash is the hardest, most difficult thing in the entire universe, and at this point I'm practically begging for Hunter to please divorce her. This relationship sounds so exhausting. Over with the sisters, Sydney comments that Bay has been weirdly attracted to watching planes flying overhead recently. The girl has been wearing the brooch Evanel gave her every single day in case I need it. Claire is getting some cupcakes ready for her children's birthday party. Sydney offers to take time off to help with the party, but her sister says no. Then Sydney says that she's going to take Bay down to see the school. But before they can go, Claire warns that Tyler is about to show up at the house and tells Sydney to send him away. A few minutes later finds Bay out in the porch swing at Tyler. She keeps thinking about the dream she had, the one she had with sparkles on her face. However, in her little 5-year-old mind, she was certain that it was planes passing by overhead and none seemed to generate the desired effect. So she asks Tyler, who tells her that maybe it was light reflecting from metal wind chimes or a mirror. Sydney comes out and tells Tyler that Claire is upset and doesn't want to see him. He insists that the only thing he did was to kiss Claire, which, wrong! Go stick your foot in a blender, you creep. Ugh. Bay and Sydney then walk down to the local elementary school, but because of her powers, Bay already knows where her classroom is. She talks about a boy who will be in her class, Dakota. Sydney is happy that her daughter is making friends and laments that her sister never really seemed to do the same. In the school, they catch another whiff of David's cologne. It makes both of them afraid, but Bay knows that her father is after Sydney and not her. After looking around for a bit, they head over to the grocery store to buy junk food, but only with the promise that they not tell Claire, or else she'll try to make Cheetos herself. When they get to the store, Henry is so startled to see them that he ends up crashing into a display of oranges, which spills him all over the floor. Sydney tries him about the entire thing, then asks what he's doing there. He explains that Evanel had given his father a giant jar of cherries, and the only thing that they could think to do with so many was to have banana splits and ice cream and such, but that they didn't have hot fudge, so Henry was there to get some. He invites Sydney and Bay to come see them, and Bay really latches into the idea of seeing the cows. As soon as Henry returns to finish his shopping, Sydney asks her daughter why she's suddenly so interested in seeing cows. Bay is confused because her mother and Henry belong together in the same way that forks belong in this specific drawer. Sydney laughs over the entire thing and insists that she and Henry are simply old friends. Bay is frustrated that her mother can't see this. And when they get to the farm, Bay also realizes that this is exactly where Sydney belongs. The narration glosses over the time that they spent at the farm, mainly highlighting how Sydney and Henry caught up while Lester charred their homemade ice cream. It was super late when Henry drove them back. Claire was insanely upset when Sydney carried Bay inside. She chided Sydney for not having told her that they were going to Lester's farm. Sydney mainly laughs over the entire thing and insists that she wouldn't simply take Bay and leave without warning. At this point, Sydney notes that her sister doesn't exactly look good. My first thought was that it had something to do with Tyler, but it might also be worry about her sister disappearing. After Claire leaves, Sydney stays in the kitchen for a bit and reads the riddles Claire had put in the pirate-themed cupcakes. Then she goes to make a call. Love my Snark, I also offer book editing services where I bring that same approach to your writing. If you prefer a more traditional approach, I also offer professional book editing services. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions about my editing services, including pricing options. Chapter 10. Like every person who had ever fallen in love, Tyler Hughes wondered what the hell was wrong with him. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with the assessment that there is anything wrong with Tyler. All I'm saying is that maybe he'd be less discontent if he chased after somebody who was, actually interested in him. How old is Claire exactly? Like in her early 30s, yeah? She's way too old to be playing mind games. It's unclear how old Tyler is, but he's also too old to be doing this kind of nonsense. What was wrong with him that he could take so much pleasure from the same thing that caused her so much pain? You sexually assaulted her. Most people don't enjoy that, especially after telling you no multiple times, I might add. Anyway, Tyler sits around in his office at the university and ponders what's wrong with him to the point that Claire isn't interested in him. He eventually stumbles upon the realization that he doesn't know the first thing about Claire. Mainly what people say is all about her family, not about the woman. He asks Anna, the woman that Claire catered the party for at the start of the novel. He asks her how well that she knows Claire. Anna says that she doesn't know Claire all that well on a personal level, mainly from a client-caterer basis. But she goes on and says that there's a lot of local legends in a town like this, and goes on to talk about how there's always some guy named Phineas Young who will be the strongest person imaginable, and that the Waverly Garden is full of magic and secrets. From an academic standpoint, this makes perfect sense. Anna even comments that Claire managed to cash in on the local rumors about her family's garden. However, since she figures that this isn't what Tyler's asking about, she goes on to say that she knows that Claire is single, and also talks about the rumors about Claire's and Sydney's mother being wild and abandoning her children, but also warns Tyler from breaking her caterer's heart. At home, Tyler mows about this and thinks about how Sydney had promised to call him after talking to her sister, which she does now, and encourages him to come around the garden via the side gate. He does as Sydney instructed and finds Claire crying in the garden in her nightdress. She's short with him and insists that she's upset because she hit her thumb. But when Claire goes off about how Sydney and Tyler will eventually go off and leave her, it's obviously speaking to a much larger issue here. Issues that I'd like to point out will not be resolved by Claire getting a boyfriend, thanks. He then starts to wipe her tears away. The next thing anybody knows, they're necking on each other like randy teenagers. She begs him not to stop. And again, highlighting the fact that playing tonsil hockey with the first male that shows her the slightest hint of affection is not going to cure her crippling abandonment issues. As they roll around on the grass, Tyler has the most overwhelming sense of deja vu, and then he realizes that he dreamt of this before, that this is what he saw when he ate the apple. Claire wakes in the morning naked and under the apple tree. She's embarrassed when she remembers being with Tyler the night before. He wakes up and points out that it says, "You're welcome," under the tree. She insists that she didn't write that and chucks apples at the tree. I have to say, I think that I'd like this story a lot more if it was more focused on the sassy apple tree and less on people whose problems are their own invention. Ugh. Back over with Fred, he thinks about his relationship with James. He explains to the readers that he dropped out of college to go home and take care of things after his father died, that he thought that it would be the end of his relationship with James, but then James came chasing after him, and as previously mentioned, when James broke up with him, James was the one who encouraged Fred to be an openly gay man rather than somebody who was ashamed of his sexuality and who he loved. Back in the present, Fred finds Evanel trying to clean up the sawdust from the construction that they're doing to her house, but that only reminds Fred that Evanel is trying to help him by turning her attic into living space, and that he's struggling to move all of these things out from the home he'd once shared with James for 30-some years. Evanel tells him that he's a lot stronger than he thinks he is, and offers to go with him to the house. As you can imagine, being in a house that you've lived in with your husband of 30-some years after you've now broken up is insanely difficult for Fred. Evanel comments on how nice everything seems in the house. Fred apologizes for never having invited her over, that throwing parties was always something James did. Evanel says that it doesn't bother her and that she's kind of used to being the social pariah. She goes on to explain that once in 1953 she had the urge to give Luanna Clark condoms. In 1953. I have to emphasize the year because, as you can imagine, it wasn't exactly as easy as popping down to Walmart and picking up a box. She had to have her husband drive her to the nearest city. Later, Evanel tried to get Luanna alone after church to quietly give her the condom, but Luanna didn't think anything of whatever Evanel was trying to give her, so in the end the condoms were handed over in plain view of half the women in town. As if that wasn't bad enough, let me read you a little snippet. Oh, I'm leaving out the most important part. Luanna's husband lost his private parts in the war. My name was Mud, and it got even worse when Luanna got pregnant a year later. She should have used those condoms. Also, follow-up question, is Luanna Ariel's mother? If you're interested in reading my own stories, you can purchase my spicy short stories as well as 2 full-length novels on Amazon. If you're not already following me on Reddit, I recommend doing so to stay updated on when I offer free content. Reddit is currently the only place where I'm advertising myself these days. Before we begin, I'd like to state that today's chapter is literally 30 pages. That is a 3 followed by a 0, or 3 tens in many other languages. That is an unholy amount of pages. If something big doesn't happen in this chapter in these freaking 30 pages, I will throw hands. Chapter 11. Sydney was going to hang out with Henry again, so Claire packed her picnic basket. Upon finding out that Claire had never been to the reservoir, Sydney begged her sister to come along. Although Sydney insisted to her sister that she and Henry were separately friends, Claire was of the opinion that Henry must have missed that memo. Then, because the situation wasn't awful enough with Sydney forcing her sister to come along, she then invited Tyler to join them. Well, at least it wouldn't be so awkward now that it's basically a double date. When they get down to the reservoir, they walk down to the water and eat the lunch Claire packed, which is oddly enough for 4 grown adults and a child, despite the fact that Claire had only packed for 2. As soon as Bay is done, she wanted to go into the water, so Henry and Sydney took her down. As soon as they were alone, Tyler insisted on telling Claire a story. Despite her insisting that she didn't want to hear her story, he steamrolled literally anything that she wanted and told her anyway. You know, kind of like how the rest of their relationship has gone so far. Anyway, Tyler's story is about some girl that he went to high school with, and one summer she got boobs and the guys lost their IQ whenever they looked at her. Which, wow, buddy, you're already on thin ice for refusing her rejection seconds ago and telling her a story. Does it really have to be about another woman's huge boobs? Tyler was obsessed with seeing this girl in a bikini and eventually worked up the nerve to go and talk to her, only except when he went over he realized too late that his pants had all but fallen off and the girl got an eyeful, except that it apparently worked because he got the girl and an awful lot of female attention for a long time after that. Ew. Having said his piece, even as bizarre and self-congratulatory as it was, Tyler then proceeds to run into the water. Sydney then comes back because, God forbid, we have a lull in the plot for 2 seconds. As soon as she's alone with her sister, Claire randomly tells Sydney that her mother was homeless, slept around, and stole things simply so that they could survive. That Claire is afraid to leave the house and make attachments because that was her life for the first 6 years of her life. Claire at least has the decency to acknowledge the fact that she knows that this is more the fault of their miserable excuse of a mother, and that she knows that she was an awful sister towards Sydney. She insists that she's saying this because she thinks that Sydney's got this romanticized idea of their mother in her head, but Sydney says no, that she doesn't think of their mother that way, that she was a miserable person who did awful things to her children, the unspoken comment being that the best their mom did for them was to abandon them with their grandmother and leave forever. We then jump over to Emma. She decides to surprise her husband in his office at work by sitting on his desk in her birthday suit, legs spread, and quickly finds out why it is that we don't do that when her father-in-law locks in. As if that wasn't bad enough, John Sr. proceeds to chew his son out, acting like this is a regular occurrence and that Emma was 100% the cause of every single problem wrong at the plant factory. I don't know, and quite frankly, I don't care. However, as you can imagine, Emma continues to do nothing but dig even deeper into the hole she's found herself in. 100 John asks why she's been so clingy and needy to the point of obvious literal embarrassment for both of them. She insists that she's afraid that he's going to leave her for Sydney, which, yeah. He wasn't thinking about Sydney before you made your relationship 100% about Sydney. Later, she apparently didn't learn a single thing about shutting her trap about Sydney, because Emma proceeds to gossip about how Sydney and Claire went on a double date to the Westbar and sons them for such childish behavior. However, Hunter John is quick to distract not only himself but his kids by ushering them outside to play in the pool, where he proceeds to ignore his wife for hours. "We need to talk," she said. "I need to know why you never want to discuss Sydney." He looked up Cyril to find her there. He grabbed a towel and dried his hair vigorously. "I think the more important question is, why are you so obsessed with her? Have you noticed that Sydney isn't actually in our lives? Has it escaped your attention that she hasn't actually done anything to us?" "Yes! Thank you! You are actively making the situation worse, moron!" "What have you been thinking about these past 10 years, Emma? The sex and the boob job and the sexy clothes, the perfect dinners and the football game? Was all of that because you thought I didn't want to be here? Was any of that because you loved me at all? Or have you been competing with Sydney all this time? I don't know, Hunter John, have I?" "That was the wrong answer, Emma," he said and walked out. "Sydney literally didn't even lift a finger. Emma ruined her relationship all by herself." And let's be honest here, if this wasn't Sydney, it would have been something else, because this is what happens when you baby trap a 19-year-old boy. Back over with Sydney, she goes to her sister late at night. She thinks about how Claire would have trouble sleeping and would often work in the garden until quite late. But after her sister's confession about the first 6 years of her life was like, she now views that behavior a lot differently. It's not anal behavior, it's the behavior of a scared little girl who thinks that she hasn't earned her keep. Sydney tells Claire about David, about how the physical abuse he dished out got so much worse after she found out that she was pregnant, about how she ran away to Boise, that David beat her so bad that she lost a tooth and couldn't see out of one eye for a week, about the kind stranger at the park who saw the battered woman and helped her to escape David. She explains that she never told David her real name, and he was under the impression that she was from New York, that Bascom is literally the only safety that she's ever known, that she wants her babe to forget all of the really, truly bad things that happened to her in such a short life. Claire then asks about the strange man that keeps following Sydney around. Sydney says that it's David's cologne. They hide under the covers and encourage Babe to get into bed with them too. When Claire wakes up, she stares at the ceiling and thinks that it's the same ceiling that her grandmother would look up at every single morning. She thinks about how Sydney had said that Granny confessed to her that she used to hang out at the reservoir when it turned into Lover's Lane after the sun went down. That at first, Claire thought that Sydney meant that Grandma went there with Grandpa, but as Claire thinks about it, she thinks about how pretty that their grandmother was, that maybe she was stealing hearts back in the day. After breakfast, Babe comments that the apple tree dropped a lot of fruit during the night. Claire says it is because the tree wanted to be with the three of them last night. The tree then starts to rain leaves down on Babe, who is delighted by this. She says that she hates apples but loves the tree. Then Claire asks Babe if she wants to see some photos of her great-grandmother. Babe agrees, but then asks if they have any photos of Babe's grandmother, Claire and Sydney's mother. They don't. Sydney was the only one who had them, and she left them behind when she escaped Seattle. At this point, I needed to take a break from reading this story. I am now 20 pages in, which isn't bad for a singular sitting and my accursed ADHD brain. Later, Claire gets all dressed up in a fancy outfit in order to see Tyler. On her way out, she asks Sydney how she looks. Sydney does a double take and insists that Claire will be fine, that Claire needs to walk into this thinking that it'll be forever. However, when Claire knocks on Tyler's door, she finds some random other woman in his living room and... Can we not? She immediately apologizes and leaves as quickly as possible. Since Claire wasn't even gone 5 minutes, she has to explain what happened. Sydney thinks that Claire is being stupid, what with not even sticking around to hear who this woman is. But from somebody who has lived with this crushing anxiety of literally nothing lasting, I can't say that I'm surprised by Claire's behavior. A little while later, Tyler shows up in Claire's room and asks why she'd come over and why she'd left. Shamefaced, she explains about that woman, which is like, kind of shouldn't have to spell this stuff out like that. He explains that yes, he and that woman used to be lovers, but they didn't work out and now they're only friends. And I get that it's okay to have friends, even friends of the opposite gender, but he has got to understand how this looks to Claire. The fact that he has to ask and spell it out for her is weird. Tyler also has to explain to her that no, it's not normal to sit around waiting for the people in your life to leave. He also promises not to leave her. And I get that Claire is coming from those years she spent living with her mother, but they don't call that the formative years for nothing after all. But at the same time, I feel like Claire needs a therapist, not some guy constantly forcing himself onto her. We jump over to Fred and Evanel because everybody else has been in here, why not jump over to this as well? Ugh. Evanel sits in bed and listens as Fred moves around in his newly converted attic space. She thinks that maybe she made a mistake in encouraging him to move in with her to move on from James when she herself still lives in the house she shared with her own husband. Eventually, she ponders if death is different than somebody divorcing you. Then she sits up and realizes that she has to give Fred something. Since he helped her to get organized, she goes directly to the gizmo drawer and pulls out a mango splitter. She feels bad because she knows that he'd been expecting her to give him something that would save his marriage, but it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Patreon has recently introduced free memberships. By joining, you'll be able to enjoy the same content I post on Tumblr, now conveniently available on Patreon. Patreon supporters can enjoy even more book Snark starting at only $1 a month. Plus, Patreon now offers a 1-week free trial. Don't miss it. Big shout out to Phoebe for supporting me on Patreon already. Also, a huge thanks to an anonymous donor for making a one-time donation. If you want to hear your name in my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Chapter 12. We open with Henry moping about Sydney. He goes for a midnight run, for some reason barefoot and wearing nothing but boxers. As he hides from a passing car, he stops to think about how badly that he wants her. This is seriously starting to get to the point of it being a little bit creepy. And then, because being inside of Henry's head as he runs wasn't bad enough, we jump over to Lester as he watches Henry run. The entire first 2 pages of the chapter were a choice. Back over with Claire, she's anxious and upset about Rachel being there. They can't exactly spend much time together because of her presence, which is kind of like one of those, why does she not simply get a hotel room? Or read the freaking room? The afternoon before Rachel is supposed to leave, Claire throws her a mini lunch party. She does it under the guise of Southern hospitality, but in reality it's so that Rachel can get a good dose of understanding that Tyler is my boyfriend magic. However, because Claire's mood is running a little hot, the luncheon is a disaster. Sydney finds her sister in the shower and complains that the entire neighborhood is cloaked in steam because of it. That night, Claire goes into Sydney's room to watch Tyler's house, literally all night long until it's morning. Tyler eventually comes out with Rachel, hugs her goodbye, and waves her off. Sydney complains that Claire's presence by the window kept her awake all night. Claire then goes to Tyler. Together, they walked into his house and made new memories. One in particular would be named Mariah Waverly Hughes and would be born 9 months later. Spoilers? Over with Sydney, she and Henry have a daily habit of him bringing her coffee after work and them walking around and talking, but only for about 20 minutes since she has to get back and he needs to go home to take care of his grandfather. During one of these walks, Henry brings up the year that Sydney went to the school Halloween party dressed as her sister. He comments that at the time it seemed like cruel mockery. Now Sydney tries to emulate her older sister in a way that seems like desperation to be like Claire. It's honestly a nice bit of literary reflection, and I enjoy it immensely. When he brings up that Halloween dance, Sydney expresses surprise that he was there. He said that he went with a girl a year older than them. This leads Sydney to casually ask him about his dating history. He says in their senior year he dated a college girl for a while and goes on to explain that his grandfather has this proverbial bee in his bonnet about Hopkins men always marry older women, which I think is terrible since this clearly stopped Henry from actually being happy. He then asks about her first love. She says that it was Hunter John since he was the first guy who ever asked her out. When she returns the question, he confesses that it was her, that when he saw her again at the 4th of July festivities, he fell in love with her all over again, and also vowed that even if she couldn't return his love, at least they could be friends again. Sydney is simply so gobsmacked by the entire thing. Emma walked into the living room that afternoon after unsuccessfully trying to make herself feel better by shopping. Yeah, because this is what I want to read about now. Ugh. Anyway, so Emma is obviously in a foul mood, one that isn't helped when Evanel shows up and hands her 2 quarters. Then she meets her mom for lunch, who insists that Emma needs more lingerie, because clearly buying something from Victoria's Secret is 100% going to fix this stank relationship. But Emma is a little startled to get home and find that Hunter John is home early. Even worse is that he says that he sent the kids away for a few hours so that they could talk, not have mind-blowing sex. Talk. He's looking through their old high school yearbook, and when she joins him on the sofa, she can't help but note that there are a lot of pictures of Hunter John, Emma, and Sydney. I look at these photos, and in every single one of them, I'm staring at her, and then I see you, and in every single one, you're staring at her, too. I forgot about her a long time ago, Emma, but you didn't forget, did you? Has Sydney been in this marriage for 10 years without my knowing it? The level that Emma has been obsessing over Sydney, if this was another book, another genre, I might think that Emma was struggling with her lesbian urges but had a homophobic mother. This level of obsession with Sydney, even 10 years after Emma won, is literally so unhinged. Emma goes on for a while about how bad she feels that she took away Hunter John's choice by baby trapping him, although at least she's smart enough not to admit to doing that. I haven't spared her more than a moment's thought in 10 years, and barely that since she's been back, but you keep bringing her up. You think that her being back has changed things, but it hasn't changed anything for me. And then, because she literally needs to be beaten with a brick about the entire thing, yet still refuses to learn, Hunter John goes on this kind of long rant about how much that he loves Emma, how beautiful that she is, etc., etc., and Emma still brings up Sydney in literally the next breath. She is too stupid to be alive! This isn't between me and you. This is between you and Sydney. I also suspect that it might be between you and your mother. I suspect that Sydney is simply the misfortunate girl who was caught up in all this nonsense. It could have been Mary Ann or Ginger, and they still would have been dragged through the mud. Hunter John is correct. This has little to do with Sydney and everything to do with the fact that Ariel has been spoon-feeding her brat that Emma was somehow owed Hunter John, that if there was some girl standing in her way, then do away with her, by any means. I don't want to be that person, Hunter John. I really don't. Then why are you acting like this? At some point it stops being cute. You passed that point some time ago, babe. The chapter ends with Hunter John literally begging for Emma to stop acting like this, to put Sydney out from their lives. For real this time. Thanks for watching. New Book Snark videos go live every Monday with occasional extras during the week. Your support means so much, even if it's not financial. Watching my videos, subscribing, and liking, and sharing them with my friends all go a long way in helping my channel grow. If you've already caught up with all my videos, you can go to Facebook, WordPress, Tumblr, or free on Patreon for my main book Snarks, always free and updated every morning. A link tree for everything is posted below. See you next week, guys. Yes, you are a kitten. Yes, you are naughty. Go do cat stuff somewhere else. No, you are being very naughty. Yes.